The Hunter's Moon Night by Jesus Castro. Prologue. Born under the wrong moon. The night Kaelen was born, the world fell silent under the crimson light of the hunter's moon. His mother cried out in labor as the forest stirred with shadows, spirits slipping through cracks in reality. No child was ever meant to survive that night. Elara, a young moon priestess at the time, stood over the laboring woman, sweat beading on her brow as the spirits whispered warnings through the mist. "Not tonight," the other priestesses murmured fearfully. "A child born under this moon will be cursed. A child like that." "Will live," Elara interrupted, her voice soft but firm. And Kaelen did live. Somehow, he survived the night when no one else should have, but at a cost. The hunter's moon touched his soul, marking him with its bloodthirsty energy. Worse still, the magic of other moons, the frost, the wolf, the flower, flickered through him, binding fragments of their power to him like shards of broken glass. The priestesses debated whether the boy was a blessing or an abomination, but Elara saw something deeper in his green eyes. The other moons rejected him, leaving his soul fractured and raw. From that moment on, Kaelen was destined to never belong, not to any one moon, not even to himself. A lifetime of struggle awaited him, and though Elara didn't yet know it, the world would one day need him more than ever. Chapter 1. A New Hunt Begins. Kaelen crouched low on the branch of a twisted oak tree, scanning the forest below. His breath curled into mist in the cold night air. The hunter's moon was rising, its red glow pushing through the clouds like a bleeding wound. Soon the spirits would come, slipping between worlds to roam free under the moon's light. He could feel the change in the air, an unnatural tension, like the forest itself was holding its breath. Kaelen tightened his grip on the bough slung across his back, the wood smooth beneath his fingertips. It was a relic from his old life, a reminder of the days when he was just a hunter and nothing more, before the curse. Before he became the hunter's moon knight. The mantle had passed to him when the previous night was found cold and broken in the forest. Kaelen hadn't asked for the title. It had been forced upon him, along with the powers. They lived under his skin now, sharp and unpredictable, as if waiting for the right moment to turn against him. A flicker of frost crawled across his fingertips before fading, and Kaelen cursed softly. The frost moon's influence, always leaking through, reminding him of how wrong everything felt inside him. His powers didn't belong to just one moon, and that made them dangerous. His curse. The snap of a twig pulled his attention to the forest floor. A familiar figure stepped into the clearing below, her silver hair glowing under the red moonlight. Elara, the moon priestess, carried a staff that hummed with quiet magic, the crystal at its tip gleaming faintly. "You shouldn't wait so close to the veil," she called softly. "The spirits are drawn to it." Kaelen dropped from the branch, landing lightly on the ground. His dark cloak settled around him as he adjusted the bow on his shoulder. "Let them come," he said, glancing toward the rising moon. "It's their night, isn't it?" Elara studied him for a long moment, her gaze soft but heavy. "Yes, and it's yours too." Kalen's jaw tightened. He hadn't wanted this. He hadn't asked for it. But the hunter's moon had chosen him anyway. He was the knight now, whether he liked it or not. "How long do I have to serve?" Kaelen muttered, more to himself than to her. "Until the curse is lifted," Elara replied, "or until the moon no longer calls you." Kaelen let out a bitter laugh. "So, forever." Alara's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of sadness in her eyes, an understanding that cut deeper than words. Chapter 2. The First Hunt. The forest twisted under the crimson moonlight as if reshaping itself to fit a darker world. Trees that had once seemed familiar now stretched unnaturally tall, their branches curling like claws. Shadows shifted in ways they shouldn't, and the mist on the ground slithered between roots like restless spirits. Kaelen followed Elara through the woods, every step sharpening his senses. He could feel the magic stirring inside him. the hunter's moon pulling at his muscles, making him faster, sharper, more alive. But it wasn't just the hunter's magic moving through him. Something colder stirred, too. A flicker of frost moon magic, dragging a chill through his bones. Kaelen clenched his fists and forced the cold back down, fighting to keep his powers under control. There, Elara whispered, pointing to the edge of the clearing ahead. Kaelen crouched low, his eyes narrowing as he spotted the spirit materializing in the mist. It looked human, almost. Its limbs were too long, and its face seemed unfinished, like a statue that had been abandoned halfway through sculpting. The air shimmered around it with unnatural energy. Kaelen felt the familiar surge of the hunter's moon magic. His heart raced as his muscles tensed, ready to strike. The hunt was what the magic wanted, what it demanded. And then something else stirred inside him, the wolf moon's rage. Kaelen's breathing quickened as the beast within him clawed for release. His hands twitched toward the knife at his belt, every instinct screaming to charge, to kill, to tear. For a brief moment, his mind flickered with visions of blood and snarling beasts, and it was all he could do to hold himself back. "Control it," Elara whispered urgently beside him. "I know," Kaelen hissed through gritted teeth, though the words felt like a lie. Chapter 3. Fenrik's Interference. Kaelen was just starting to regain control when a figure stepped from the shadows on the far side of the clearing. His heart sank as he recognized the intruder. Fenrik. The other hunter's dark eyes gleamed with jealousy as he approached, a jagged spear in hand. "Looks like the great hunter's moon knight is struggling," Fenrik sneered. "Didn't think you deserved the title, Kaelen." Kaelen straightened slowly, his gaze cold. "You don't know what you're messing with, Fenrik." But Fenrik just grinned, stepping closer, the spear glinting under the moonlight. "Don't I?" To be continued. Kaelen took a step forward, placing himself between Fenrik and the spirit, his grip tightening on the hilt of his knife. The cold edge of the frost moon flickered through him again, spreading a chill into his fingertips. "Leave, Fenrik," Kaelen said, his voice low. "You have no idea what this magic can do." Fenrik scoffed. "I know enough." He twirled the jagged spear in his hand, the sharp metal catching the red glow of the moon. "You don't deserve that power. It should have been mine." Kaelen's muscles coiled instinctively, the hunter's moon magic urging him to strike, to end this threat before it escalated. But the wolf moon's influence simmered just below the surface, and Kaelen knew if he gave in even a little, he might not stop himself. The spirit in the clearing twisted, sensing the conflict. Its shadowy form pulsed, stretching its limbs as if testing the boundaries between realms. "You're going to get yourself killed," Kaelen warned, trying to keep his voice steady. Fenrik's grin only widened. "Or maybe, I'll kill you and take your place." Without warning, Fenrik lunged. Kaelen reacted on instinct. He ducked low, the tip of Fenrik's spear whistling past his head. In a flash, Kaelen's knife was in his hand. He spun on his heel and slashed, forcing Fenrik to leap back. "You idiot!" Kaelen snarled, struggling to hold back the rage burning inside him. "This isn't a game!" Fenrik lunged again, his spear aimed for Kaelen's chest. Kaelen blocked with the flat of his knife, but the impact sent a shock through his arm, and his hunter's moon reflexes surged, driving him to strike before he could think. His next blow came too fast, too fierce, a blur of speed and precision that should have left Fenrik on the ground, but instead, Fenrik grinned, as if he had expected it. Kaelen's heart sank as Fenrik whispered a word in an ancient tongue, and the spear in his hand pulsed with dark energy. The ground shifted beneath them. Kaelen felt the air grow heavier, as though a door had cracked open between worlds. A low, hungry growl echoed through the mist, a sound that didn't belong to any mortal creature. "Fenrik, what did you do?" Kaelen whispered, ice creeping into his voice. Fenrik laughed, low and smug. "I made a deal." Behind Fenrik, the spirit twisted again, its form growing darker, more defined. What had once been a shadow now had the shape of something monstrous. Long limbs, claws like scythes, and hollow eyes that burned with pale fire.